You're in the whole 6010.
Hello and welcome to Fantasy Focus Football presented by Boost Mobile. My name is Daniel Dopp, here with my two best friends, Yates and Stephania Bell. And my friendship with Mike is on hold because he played Ja'Marr Chase against me in our dynasty.
Wow, rude.
I just feel like that was
you start him over?
That was a personal
It was
thing.
him or Trey Tucker, and I was like, all right, I'll give Chase a shot.
I don't know why. I don't know what that guy's ever done for
It's a good
fantasy
matchup. It was a good
managers.
matchup.
That's what it was. It was
Higgins was out. You know, I had to consider a few things. But
Yeah, it's a good call. Yeah, I would have played Trey Tucker. I don't care that he's on a bye, just out of respect.
I love you,
Not
Field.
For Daniel.
Yeah,
not
yeah,
for
that's why.
The matchup for Trey Tucker or Ja'Marr Chase. What a ridiculous game. Best football game of the season as far as standalone games are concerned.
Oh,
in
my
eyes,
gosh.
specifically in fantasy football. And I want you guys to all thank me for that because, I don't know, at some point during the first half, I texted Mike and I said, classic defensive struggle taking place right now.
That's true.
So from that point on, there were no more defensive stops. So you're welcome. I don't often exert my authority, but it turns out I do have the authority to turn games around. So I'm sorry to you, Daniel, for inspiring Ja'Marr Chase. But what a freaking second half that was.
Yeah.
I know.
I also want to apologize, though, because, like, you were, like, giving us such a hard time for picking the Ravens yesterday on the show. To the
true.
point that they cut a clip, and then when the Bengals were winning the game, you texted that clip to us to double down on talking smack about your Bengals pick, and then they lost.
You, Mike, I was trying to brag, and yeah, I apparently cursed the Bengals as well. So my bad on that.
I'll tell you what, it was the
Fantasy
first
takeaways, though?
Well, there weren't really a lot of fantasy takeaways in the first half. It actually felt like this was going to be a Thursday night football game in the first half, and then the second half happened, and it was like, oh man.
All hail Ja'Marr Chase.
Oh, my
Guys, 55.4 fantasy points, 11 catches, 3 touchdowns. That's right, 3 touchdowns, 264 receiving yards. One of the greatest games literally in the history of fantasy football by Ja'Marr Chase, who, as our buddy Tristan H. Cockcraft, the H stands for happy, or in this case, perhaps, happy I started Ja'Marr Chase, now is the first player in NFL history with 3 separate 50-plus point games. Wow, breaking a tie with Jerry Rice.
Sounds good.
Seems good to me. Yeah.
He was great, and check this out, just to add some perspective for how good he's been this season and how much last night helped. Now, I know he has a game up on a couple of players. It doesn't matter, because check this out. Right now, as things stand, he has 67.7 more fantasy points this year than any other wide receiver. And if you just take his 2 games against the Ravens, he has 96.7 fantasy points against the Ravens.
Oh my
Oh,
god.
wow.
Just those alone. If he only appeared in those 2 games, he would be 27th at receiver in fantasy points this year.
That's
man.
hilarious.
That is just ridiculous.
Wow. That is
Unbelievable. I mean, this entire Bengals offense honestly was cooking. Joe Burrow, another fantastic performance here. I mean, it feels like he's worked our way into the set it and forget it category with the way that this offense and him, he's clicking with everybody.
He was the 7th highest player in all of fantasy, regardless of position, coming into
the week.
game. So
Yeah.
he'll be probably even further up that list now. He's ridiculous.
By the way, we've talked about the Fantasy Focus Fantasy League quite a bit on the show throughout the year, and I auto-drafted the first few rounds because I was picking up my daughters. We've talked about that before. So I have Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow. So all week this week, I was trying to trade all of you Joe Burrow. I sent
Not me.
a bunch of offers. I think you have Josh Allen or something.
I have
But
Jaden
pretty much everyone
No, I
else,
don't.
and no one accepted.
I have
so
Sam Darnold.
He was just sitting on my bench.
Oh, fantasy football
Focus.
now.
No, the Fantasy Focus League. I don't know,
Dude,
but anyway.
I have, worst team ever.
Well, anyway, so I'm just saying, I tried to give you one.
Did you start this
Joe
week?
Burrow,
Did
and
you start Jalen Hurts or Joe Burrow?
started Jalen Hurts. So.
Yes, of course you did.
Of course, right? Yeah. Of course. Which by the way,
I had all them trade offers out. I was trying to move.
Well, I
Phil
think you
Am.
tried to trade me.
I think I did, yeah.
I think it did, but did you want Bijan Robinson
I did,
or
but
something?
I offered
And
you other skill players too. So yeah.
Interesting.
Well,
I
look,
mean,
you could have got 40 points out of Burrow. I'm just saying you're not going to get that.
right.
What's
You didn't
the most
guarantee
Bijan
me
had?
that ridiculous, best game of his season.
It's
And
like
but
330 points.
I was going to say, I'm not even sure it's his best game of the season, which is wild, just because he had the 5 touchdowns
Yeah.
against
Right.
the Ravens as well. They're ridiculous right now. Joe is awesome. We talk about these quarterbacks who don't offer a ton with their legs and how hard it is to reach fantasy relevance.
Yeah.
Joe Burrow's like, nah. Does not apply to me because he had 6 rushing yards last night. 6.
And he did it.
They throw the football so much, 56 times last night.
right. It's the volume, and it's really like he looks fantastic because of Ja'Marr Chase. Like if you just watch, like Jermaine Burton got some targets. People were wondering, was that going to happen? He got a few, but
I mean, he might want to think differently about those. Those looked out of sync last night, didn't they?
But that's exactly what I was about to say. Is that they are not in sync. And when you watch him and Jamar Chase, and obviously they played together in college, but it's the way he places the ball. They are dimes. And Jamar Chase, he knows exactly where he's going to be. Jamar Chase made this little in cut on one route, split the defenders, and then the ball was like right there for him. So the two of them together, I mean, when he's on the field, he elevates Joe Burrow tremendously.
I also felt like we were kind of, one of the things that you had talked about coming into this game yesterday. By the way, if you did not check out yesterday's show, the part 1 preview of week 10, go check that out on Thursday. One of the things you said you were watching for was how this team is going to utilize Khalil Herbert in his first game out of the backfield. The way they utilized him was they gave him one carry. He basically fumbled that on the handoff, and then he didn't touch the ball the rest of the game.
He hardly played. He had like 3 total snaps between him and Travion Williams. So right. I think Cincinnati will work very hard by the time they play next week to have a bit more balance and equity in their backfield. Mm-hmm. But if that does not happen, guys, we're talking about a top 10 running back in Chase Brown, because while the rushing efficiency will be okay, when you're playing 80 or 90 or 95% of the snaps in one of the past happiest offenses in the NFL, which, by the way, includes a lot of dump-offs, he had 9 catches last night, Chase Brown. 9.
I mean, that's another, it boosts both of their value. That's another reason that Joe Burrow, those are pass completions to your running back. Your run game is pass heavy.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Look at the Ravens, though, because this
got to.
Like, awesome. Lamar, all hail. You're the best.
Still
love you. You're so ridiculous. Derrick Henry found the end zone again. Not a great night for Derrick Henry, but like, listen, he's so ridiculous that when you're complaining about 13 or 14 fantasy points,
scored.
The shame is on you.
That's his floor, right? It feels like 13 or 14 is like the basement of his floor.
Yes. Derrick Henry.
Who else found the end zone? Mark Andrews.
Mark Andrews, baby, let's go.
Mark Andrews. Look, now, granted, Isaiah likely was not playing last night because he's injured, but that was a nice outing for Mark Andrews. If you're getting 18.8 fantasy points out of your tight end, you're pretty pleased with that.
Pretty darn good. I think the question, though, for the Ravens coming out of this is, not the question, the statement. Until further notice, Deontay Johnson shall be banished to your bench, because this one's confusing. Not totally confusing, but a little bit confusing in this regard. They have receivers they trust a lot, right? Apparently they have 4 they trust more than Deontay Johnson, though, because it wasn't just Zay Flowers, which you did not expect him to jump Zay Flowers, right? Rashad Bateman's been pretty good this year. Maybe he could run like kind of close to him. But 84-yard touchdown passes to Tylan Wallace were not the things that I had considered going into this game. And, Mike, why would you change it if you're the Ravens?
Because Deontay Johnson's better than Nelson Aguilar and Tyler. There's a reason you traded for him. So we did talk about this, though. It was a luxury ad for them. He's going to progressively work his way into the offense. I suspect he'll play more after the 10 days off now. But to the extent that it's puts him on the fantasy radar, I'm not sure. Not yet. I think we need to see it first. But I mean, he played less in this game than he played in his first game with the team. He went from 20% of the snaps to just 5 snaps and 2 targets in this game last night. So that was surprising that he regressed a little bit in that department. 2
things on this. If he does not play more in the next game, we are like totally Houston has a problem.
Yes.
Second of all, it ain't going to work. This is a player who is discontent in multiple spots before this. If they keep playing him like this, we're going to hear something from Deontay Johnson. I'm just telling you. So they may need to get it figured out, if for no other reason than to keep the chemistry alive in this locker room. But now that you think like the luxury, you're correct. Like, this was a luxury ad, but I'm starting to feel like, like sometimes I'll see like a report on some random blog and be like, Jeff Bezos buys home in like Santa Fe, and you're like, it's his 94th home. Like, at some point, wouldn't you rather just go rent for 7 days? Like, you're going to you can only spend so many days in these homes. Like, Jeff Bezos bought a new house. Congratulations. The Ravens
I don't know. I think they just have been so close for so long. They want to win a Super Bowl. Like, you have one injury to Flowers, and then you're like, oh, man, we're a mess.
You guys are like one step ahead of my comments. That's exactly what I was going to say. They have so been bitten by the injury bug in previous years, and then they're down, and all of a sudden they don't have the personnel to be able to achieve the goal that they want. And clearly, they are playing for the postseason. I mean, look at the role they're on. So Deontay Johnson, they can afford to bring him along slowly. And if you're Deontay Johnson, why are you complaining if you are going to be on a team that has the potential to go all the way to the Super Bowl?
Because you're going to be a free agent in 5 months. And if you have a non-role, you're going to get,
by the way,
millions lost.
Go ahead.
I don't know, but if I'm your agent, I'm advising against complaining, because that's not going to help attract you anywhere. Instead, do what you can, contribute when you can. And I think you got to be smarter at this point.
By the way, if he didn't fall down in that one play, he might have had like a 55-yard catch, or he might be having a different conversation. He might have played more. He might have played more after that,
Mike,
as well.
Can I just say I appreciate you not starting Mark Andrews against me in the Dynasty League? He's had double-digit fantasy points in 4 or 5. Have you played him in any of those games?
I have Kate Otten. I'm not complaining.
Oh, okay. I got Kate Otten. No big deal,
I'm
guys.
good. Yeah.
Got it. Sweet.
Show off.
I don't need
All right.
that, guys. This is backup material.
When we come back, we're going to dive into some potentially worrisome wide receivers. We'll see you guys in just a moment back here on Fantasy Focus. Best part about ESPN Fantasy is you guys, the fantasy football community, and we want to make sure that we are always answering your questions. Head on over to Twitter and use the hashtag FFNow to drop your questions in over there. Maybe talk a little bit of smack to Mike Clay or let us know how much you do or don't like his dad jokes. Use the hashtag FFNow. Tune in on Sunday on ESPN2 at 10 a.m. Eastern and see if you make it on the show. Back here on Fantasy Focus, alongside Mike Clay, Stephania Bell, and Field Yates, my name is Daniel Dopp. We're diving into some potentially worrisome wide receivers or worried situations that we have. Let's start really quickly with this Dallas and Philly game, Stephania. Before we talk about anyone here that's going to go this week, I want to ask you about 2 wide receivers that have been banged up, CeeDee Lamb and A.J. Brown. What do we expect for them in Week 10?
Yeah, well, CeeDee Lamb already told reporters that he plans to be out there. It was interesting. He said, I know somebody paid their last dollar to come out and see me. He's feeling much better now than he did originally when he landed on that shoulder, suffered an AC joint injury. And the hardest thing with that is getting your full range of motion, getting your arm overhead. So you worry for a receiver. Can he make the plays? Excuse me, he said he's already got his full range of motion back. It's a question of pain. We've seen Jordan Mason for the running back for the 49ers who had a similar injury. And when you get banged up again, sometimes it forces you out of the game. So to me, that's the biggest risk, is that if he goes up and makes a big play and lands on it, he might exit early, but that could happen in any game. So I would feel comfortable starting him for fantasy purposes. I do just want to mention his quarterback still seeking opinions to determine whether he needs surgery for that partially torn hamstring or not. So it will be Cooper Rush under center for CeeDee Lamb. And then on the other side, A.J. Brown with the knee injury, kind of had that awkward fall that forced him to exit early last week. But he's actually been in practice every single day, and yesterday full participant. So it really looks like A.J. Brown will be out there for the Eagles. Yeah,
it's crazy to me that you can have an AC sprain, and I think Field about you with the shoulder injury that you had, like getting your hand up over your shoulder like that feels like not just landing on it, but just like
in my
that
group
range of
text with
motion.
Shohei and CD, we were talking about just
support group.
It's titled Warriors Who Play Through Shoulder Injury.
Oh, that's what it's called.
Yeah. I agree with you, Dan. Yeah, it's something like I feel very blessed to have physical capacity to continue to do things like that. It's a great point though by you.
Yeah. Let's say that you've got CeeDee Lamb. You're obviously starting him here, knowing that Cooper Rush is going to be under center. Are you going to throw a dart at any of these other wide receivers, including Jonathon Mingo, who just got traded to the team?
No, absolutely not. Any more questions?
All right.
That's a funny question.
No, I mean,
what are you watching to see potentially from Jonathon Mingo? Like they traded for him because they needed wide receiver depth.
They did, yeah. We have seen this pattern though for wide receivers that were traded or wide receivers that were cut and picked up elsewhere. Is like we don't expect a huge role in week 1. This has not exactly been an offense capable of sustaining multiple receivers throughout the year. Right now, this to me felt like the Cowboys taking a chance on a guy who might impact their future in 2025 and beyond, more so than a difference maker for 2020.
Yeah, people know like CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Tolbert, but I don't know if anyone has ever even heard of Jalen Brooks, and he's been running as their number 3 receiver for a month now with Brandon Cooks out. So I think that's why they threw a dart at a low cost, second round pick from last year. Just take a shot at a 23-year-old. I mean, I still think they overpaid. It was definitely probably a guy that gets cut next offseason. So I don't understand it from that perspective, but they're going to work him in, and maybe he takes that 3 job until Brandon Cooks comes back. But not on the fantasy radar right now.
Do you have a sense as to why he just wasn't getting any run in Carolina before he came to Dallas?
Hasn't lived up to his pedigree. I mean, he's getting outplayed. They brought, like David Moore came in from, he was in Tampa Bay with Dave Canales. He came in, he passed him out. Devin Tompkins is there now. He comes from Tampa Bay, was on that team last year. He's there, and they're getting him involved and playing him alongside or ahead of Mingo. So they just look at, Thielen will be back soon from IR. Like, they just have a lot of guys they just are stack up better.
Guys that they liked more than the guy they invested a second-round pick in.
Yeah, he's been just phased out progressively out of that offense. Played a little, but just not much. He's just wasn't a part of their future.
Interesting. We'll see about Thielen. He went from practicing a couple weeks ago to not practicing at all, and they've only got till next Wednesday to activate him, or else he's done for the year. So it's not really clear what's going on with him, but he could be back soon.
All right.
He could not be back.
I think he'll be back. But yeah,
Not this week, probably.
They have no reason to rush him
Well,
back.
yeah,
when
he's
you
not
are
practicing at all right now.
Bryce Young,
They also
that
are-
offense, like they got plenty of reasons to think about the future right now.
Yeah.
In Carolina.
They're also headed to Germany, so maybe not the week you want to bring
That's fair.
Yeah.
somebody back.
They,
Big trip to
left him
Germany,
behind,
though,
right?
guys.
They left him behind, right?
I
I think they officially ruled him out yesterday.
Yeah.
They didn't bring him to.
Yeah. Jonathon Brooks, though, they're bringing him. He's going to make his
He is making the trip. We'll see what happens.
Talk about him in a little bit later on in the show as well. I want to talk about Denver and Kansas City as well, guys. Here's a big conversation because after DeAndre Hopkins last week, I mean, he absolutely crushed it last week for what it's
he
worth.
did.
Yeah, he did.
9 targets, 8 receptions, 86 yards, 2 touchdowns, 28.6 fantasy points. It felt like we finally had another pass catcher not named Travis Kelce in this offense. But, Mike, this week, he gets that dreaded Pat Surtain shadow.
Yeah, I don't think it's 100%, and he won't be on him. He won't be on him full time because so far since Hopkins joined the Chiefs, he's been in the slot. Let's do some math. 36% of the time, so about a third of the time he'll dodge.
Sorry, you just did 36% kind of math in your head?
Well, no, I
you
mean, I had 64%, so it was simple.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought you looked at the numbers and you were able just to
Honestly, I
figure
should
out.
have been able to get there.
100 minus 64 is 48.
No, it's not.
Fact check? Do we need to fact check the podcast now?
38%.
It's 36%.
Wow. Okay.
36%.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
All right, so anyway, I had it right the first time, so let's move forward. Surtain should be on him about a third of the time in this game. So, yes, it's a tough matchup. Surtain has shadowed 4 receivers this season. They averaged 5.9 fantasy points per game. So, yeah, Hopkins looked good last week. And he might, could he line up in the slot near the goal line and catch a touchdown? Absolutely. I still think you start him, but he's probably not going to do what he did last week in this matchup.
Yeah, 9 targets on 32 routes run. Going to be hard whether he sees all of Pat Surtain II or not. On the positive side, I did like this from DeAndre Hopkins last week. 7.67 air yards per target. 2 reasons why that matters. Remember early in Tennessee when we were seeing all these YOLO throws down the field from Will Levis to both Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins? A, those are less efficient. B, I think the impact of shadow corners can either be really suffocating on throws right at the line of scrimmage when they're still being physical with you, or throws way down the field where they have a chance to either catch up or stay in stride with the receiver. Yep. I like receivers who are doing their damage in the intermediate passing game against shadow corners because I just think it opens up a few more opportunities. I've got him as wide receiver 30, so there's definitely some risk there, but it's going to be Travis Kelce. It's going to be DeAndre Hopkins. Patrick Mahomes coming off of the best game of his season, still good enough to be a flex option.
Patrick Mahomes, by the way, fully practicing. If you were worried about the ankle, that he needed help off the field, and obviously he came back and played, but not missing a beat.
Seems like things will be all go there. All right. What about Courtland Sutton on the other side of this? Because the last 2 games, Field Yates, he has been really good, double-digit targets in both. The chemistry between him and Bo Nix seems to be trending upwards.
It is 100-plus yards in each of these last 2 games as well. 15 catches on 21 targets, 100-plus yards. I think it was exactly 100 last week, so he got there. Even by the skin of his teeth. I will say this, remember early on in the season when he was really struggling and I dug on those numbers about Bo Nix and his really significant struggles throwing the football down the field. He was amongst the league worst quarterbacks. Recently, of late for Bo Nix, on passes of 11 or more air yards, because our filters are 1 through 10, 11 through 20, so everything 11 and above. 14 of his last 32. That's not great, right? That's below 50%. But it was trending closer to 25%. So the fact that it's gone up to maybe 40, 45-ish% is enough to make a difference for Courtland Sutton. The chemistry, I think, has developed as a result of those increased accuracy
concerns?
No, I guess they would be decreased accuracy concerns. So I've got Courtland Sutton as wide receiver 26. Mike, you can tell us about the bad matchup.
Yeah, I'm a little bit lower, just slightly, though. It's close. I will say this. Last 2 games, Oh, well, that's after. Well, what am I? I'm ahead of you. Oh, I don't know. Anyway,
I had him as 28 prior to last night.
Yeah, fair enough. The only thing I wanted to add is they played Carolina and Baltimore last week. You saw the Baltimore pass defense last night. We know how bad Carolina's been. He's taken advantage of those matchups for sure. He's had some duds this season. He's been back and forth. He's been a little unlucky in touchdowns. Last year was lucky. He had 10 touchdowns. This year a little unlucky, but he's still 7th at receiver and end zone targets. So perhaps he'll get more of those going forward. But this is a tough matchup. Chiefs, fewest yards, 7th fewest fantasy points to receivers. No receiver has reached 20 against them this entire season. So limited ceiling on what we're going to get at Sutton this week.
At least it feels like Bo Nix is looking for him. Because remember, in week 7, it was a flat line, right? 0 for 0 was the stat line for him. Before that, it was running between 2 and 4 targets in a game. And now all of a sudden the volume is basically doubled in the last 2 weeks. So it at least feels like he is looking for him in a way that we were wondering why they were not seeing each other.
This is one of those situations, too, where I feel like, the Chiefs undefeated so far this year, right?
Yeah.
You would think that it was kind of like, we often talk about like the YOLO ball, where it's like guys are always down, teams are down, so you've got to throw the football. But like it doesn't always work out that way against Kansas City with how good their secondary.
Because they just win close
so much
games.
pressure,
They have
too.
by far the worst point differential of any team that's 8-0 in NFL history, right? They just find ways to just
Grinding it out.
They're just better when it matters than every other opponent they play.
Yeah.
Other opponents get a little nervous. The Chiefs just like, we got this. So you're right. Game script has not been such where you're like, oh, wow, they're 8-0. They must be giving up a ton of passing yards, kind of like where the Lions or the Ravens are, because, like where San Francisco was last year so often. So anyways.
Yep.
Good call.
All right. When we come back, we're going to dive into more wide receiver worries. Wide receiver worries part 2. We'll see you guys back here in just a moment. Fantasy playoffs are fast approaching. Make sure that you make the cut by subscribing to ESPN Plus. Find tips, tricks, and strategies by some of the best in the business, and make sure you are fighting for your fantasy championship before it is too late. Subscribe to ESPN Plus right now. Go to ESPNplus.com. Back here on Fantasy Focus, my name is Daniel Dopp with Field Yates, Stephania Bell, and Mike Clay, diving into our Week 10 preview part 2.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a couple more wide receivers here, guys. And let's start with the Giants and Carolina. We got Xavier Legette. We got Wan'Dale Robinson, 2 wide receivers on each side of this. Xavier Legette has been pretty good the last couple of weeks. 11.4 fantasy points in 4 of his last 6 games. He's going to have Bryce Young under center. How does having Bryce rather than Andy Dalton impact the way that you approach having Xavier Legette in your lineup?
I think the ceiling is lower. However, there's no more Deontay Johnson, no Adam Thielen this week. So Legette ends up as wide receiver 35 on my board right now. Wan'Dale Robinson at wide receiver 41. I apologize. Those have been updated because of Thursday Night Football. So wide receiver 33 for Legette and wide receiver 39 for Wan'Dale Robinson. Back-to-back games with exactly 4 catches for Legette. He's got 4 touchdowns in his past 6 games. And I think if you're kind of choosing between these 2 players, or these 2 types of players, it comes down to who has a better chance of scoring a touchdown. Not to go all Mike Clay on you guys, but how many end zone targets do you think Wan'Dale Robinson has this season?
17.
0.
One of us has to be on the other side.
I love it.
You know what I mean?
Mike always does the pragmatic thing, right? Like
I'm trying to play into the
answer's
bit.
0.
Right,
He has
right.
0
He's trying to
end zone
actually
targets.
get it right.
Yeah.
So Robinson.
Why do you guys get this? We had this conversation about red zone yesterday. The field was making fun of me because I try to get them right. It's like, that's the whole point.
But like when Field asks the question, we know the answer is 0. So you say something other than
It
that.
would have been 3 or something. That would have been low. I don't know.
How do you know that Daniel doesn't know? He might.
Maybe he thought it was 17. You're just covering your tracks by
That's exactly
not
what
taking
it
it
is.
seriously.
He just wants to establish the outer perimeter here,
Right.
right?
That's
So
right.
we got 7. It's definitely fewer than 17.
Yep.
It's either greater than or equal to 0. So
Whoa,
Mike,
that's
you win.
0? I thought it was 17. That's crazy.
No, I know, me too.
Thank you.
I think 17 was last season, but just in one game. He had-
By the way, hilariously, Deontay Johnson leads the NFL in end zone targets.
Stop it. Stop.
he might not have one the
start
rest
him.
of the year.
Yeah.
But Wan'Dale's kind of fallen off, right? This guy started hot with all of those targets going his way. I'm not exactly sure what has changed for the Giants offense.
I think it's Theo Johnson, their tight end, who's all of a sudden getting a handful of targets per game. And are those the ones that were going to Wan'Dale before? I don't know. But all of a sudden, we're learning about Theo Johnson, who gets in the end zone for a score last week.
And that makes sense because oftentimes routes will turn into targets.
Right.
He's been running all the routes this year. And Darius Slayton did a little more, a little less
Darius Slayton.
Malik Neighbors from earlier in the year. But, Wan'Dale's been down as well. It's just other guys have kind of picked it up. But Wan'Dale his production has gone down as well. So that's kind of just mixing and matching where the ball's
or
going.
Darius Slayton this week. That might help
Right.
Wan'Dale a little bit. He's not traveling as well. So, yeah, tricky one.
Through week 7, I don't know if you just said this, Mike, but through week 7, Wan'Dale Robinson was 2nd in targets in the NFL.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And now these last
Still up
2
there.
weeks, it's like he is, like you guys are talking about, he's just fallen off within this offense. It just hasn't looked great.
He's 10 or fewer fantasy points in 4 straight games.
That's not what you're looking for.
ideal, yeah.
Are we? Are you still worried about potentially having? And I know last week you had mentioned, I'm keeping an eye on Jalen Cokers.
Yeah.
Is he as much of a threat to Xavier Legette as we were wondering he may be last week?
I thought he played an alarmingly low number of snaps last week, under 50% for Jalen Coker. After the prior week, I think leading all Panthers wide receivers in snaps. So they were saying all the right things about him, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, why is he not playing that much? I don't know where the snaps that Jonathan Mingo played last week go to. Didn't play a ton, but it might be that somebody else steps into a role, or it might be that those go to Jalen Coker because he was under 50% last year.
Yeah, I think he'll be second in line. I think it gets the feature target, and then you'll have Coker, and then you're going to have David Moore and Tompkins.
David Moore is going to play the Marquez Valdez-Scantling Memorial role where you're on the field every single snap. You just see like one target a month.
Mm-hmm. I know that this is a wide receiver segment, but I do want to ask Stephania, with both of these teams, Stephania, not only do we have Chuba Hubbard, who just got a ton of money, but now he's going to have some competition in the backfield.
Or
obviously.
is he?
Well, that's the question with Jonathon Brooks.
It's interesting. So Jonathon Brooks, it was added to the 53-man roster on Wednesday, and this is what we were waiting for, right? He had to be activated soon. The window was closing. But that doesn't mean that you have to play him if you're the Carolina Panthers. And if you listen to what they're saying, I know they're being extremely cautious. I do think Jonathon Brooks is going to see the field, but he's not going to see the field in the volume that you want for fantasy purposes. And they talked about Chuba Hubbard, and it was interesting because their offensive coordinator, Brad, is it Idzik, how you pronounce it? But I was listening to what he was saying about Chuba Hubbard being the main workload guy and how even Chuba Hubbard has evolved his game. It's one of the things they've liked about him in terms of his vision and hesitating at certain points and not necessarily being so aggressive on every run, but taking the lanes that are given to him, and how they feel like Jonathon can learn from that and learn about being an NFL running back. I mean, there's a lot of this conversation about how watching and learning and practice is going to help him be better when he takes the field. So I don't know that it'll be this week in Germany that he steps on the field for the first time. I do think he'll get there, but if you were holding out like he's going to dominate in fantasy, I am not getting that sense.
Nope. Yeah.
And they go on a bye next week too. So, I think conservatively,
week 12.
The first time you see even further than that, the first time where you see the opportunity to maybe start Jonathon Brooks would be week 13, because you're not going to start him in week 12 if he's basically coming in cold for the first time all season. I as we said, I think it was yesterday, the day before on the show, I think this is a 2025 consideration now. And the wind has been pulled from the sails after the 4-year extension for Chuba Hubbard.
Serious money.
I tell you what, well, the Panthers, if nothing else, got the internet talking about that extension, right? A lot of opinions on the decision to extend Chuba Hubbard.
Yeah.
Which we'll see.
They like him.
Yeah. Good, reliable player. I mean, the only thing I'm watching is he hasn't been very good in the passing game. He used to not be using it. They're using him more this year, but it hasn't been effective. He's 8th in targets, 32nd in receiving yards. So, that could be an area where Jonathon Brooks maybe gets more involved. They've been using Miles Sanders there. But he's 7th in expected touchdowns among running backs. So even in a bad offense, he's getting opportunities to score. It's kind of all around, other than the receiving efficiency has been very good. So he's still a guy you feel good starting, for now at least.
Yeah, I wonder, though, do we tell them now to just eliminate those last 2 years of the deal when he'll be 28 and older, Mike?
You just cut him at that point. I mean,
It's
basically retired.
Dead money.
It's interesting to me that everybody's so when you look at these contracts, they're like, oh, they locked him up for so long. We've seen this time and time again. They set these contracts, they change their mind all the time. Guys get partway through deals, release them, they trade. So I don't know why people obsess so much over the fact this is a 4-year deal.
Why? Just from a football perspective.
How often, by the way, do running backs actually, believe me, I've been looking at this, as you guys know, how often do they really live out their full deal or get paid beyond it or extended?
The answer for a while was that, and Christian McCaffrey just broke this, was of the top 10 highest paid running back contracts of all time, 0 reached their expiration.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Part of the reason why the conversation is what it is that, there's a fungibility to that spot, right? I understand, you get some greatness out of top paid backs, but you also find Kareem Hunt off the scrap heap, and he's now one of the, 15 most valuable backs in the entire NFL. It's a very, very wide-ranging conversation that we could probably do an entire off-season show on.
But it also makes sense to me if you find someone you like who's been reliable in your offense, who you think is going to be a good buffer for your new young running back that's ultimately going to be a star for the team, why not ensure that you keep him?
I realize that I'm the resident Lions fan here, so I don't want to just do a bunch of Lions stuff. But one of the things I just kept seeing on the internet was the Panthers are trying to capture that David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, backfield, the way that they've got 2 different running backs.
Oh, I thought you were saying they traded for Jahmyr.
No. But in order to do that, you still have to have a legitimate offensive line. That's one of the things that I feel
the offensive line is good, Carolina. I'm okay with their offensive line. I think that we'll see on Brooks. He's never played, but right now, pretty clearly, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery 1A, and then Chuba Hubbard and Jonathon Brooks are 3 and 4 in that for running back.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, that's the long-term plan. They're trying to build something up here. I understand trying to keep Hubbard around for a while, just have that reliable piece in the
What he's
back.
done. Yeah. What about for the Giants, Mike Clay? Obviously, it looks like we've seen.
Don't say all the good stats because I need them for later.
We've
All right, let me find some bad stats.
We've seen Tyrone Tracy take over as the RB1 of this backfield. And so I have him as a top 20 running back. I think we're all right in that same range as like an RB20, a low-end RB2. My question to you is less about Tyrone Tracy, but it's more about the idea of that taking on the Carolina Panthers.
Don't use all the good stats.
Do you think that there's a potential that you could flex Devin Singletary because of this matchup?
Devin Singletary, no, I wouldn't use him. I'm trying to not use any stats here. Tyrone Tracy, good.
Good.
Yep, that's good.
Good at football.
Great matchup.
Great matchup.
Panthers who stink at defense. Tracy's the lead back.
Yep.
Thank you, Mike.
That's it. I'll just leave
did it
Make
without
more
numbers.
sense. Listen, it'll make sense later.
Start Tyrone Tracy. That's
There you go.
3 words.
That's it.
Good. I'll let you have the stats later. I have a lot of stats here.
You know, like every once in a while, like when your computer just stops and like the screen just goes blank. That was the Mike Clay equivalent of it. It was
I was just turning stats into words. All
all.
right, man. Look, I don't want you to start doing computer
handicapped
noises
you.
like yesterday, making fun of me for being good at red zone. So
You were a computer. You're a computer.
I was a computer yesterday.
I'm a computer kid.
Wanna hear
Stop all the
Stephania?
downloading.
Want to hear it?
I remember that.
Yeah.
Oh my God. What is that?
Old
Is
internet.
that like the G.I. Joe's thing?
Yeah, that was like the G.I. Joe's thing.
Let me indulge Stephania. She wants to hear it. Mike Evans will not score a touchdown on Sunday. Marshawn Lattimore has allowed a negative .27 EPA per pass attempt, third most amongst qualified cornerbacks in the Dan Quinn era.
I love it.
This is
That's
what happens.
funnier than some of the dad jokes.
This is what happens when he's down by 19 points in red zone.
Wow. Wow.
Starts to break and fall apart. Can't
You
talk
know,
right.
red zone is like the NBA in-season tournament. First, no one actually cares, Mike. Darvin Ham won it last year and got fired.
That's weird. He seemed to care a lot when he won it a couple years ago. But
I mean,
Can I just say that
I'm bored of it. I've won it so many times. Like Beyonce wins another Grammy, huh? All right, well, like, where do I put this one, you know?
I still don't understand the NBA in-season tournament for what it's worth. I just want to be honest about that. I
the
don't.
NBA. I'm a step.
It's a new Carolina Panthers running back.
That's what it is. Yeah.
On that.
Oh, that's so good.
Oh, man, Mike. You're
All right. When we come back, we got more here on Fantasy Focus. Make sure you stick around for all the fun.
coming.
We'll see you guys in just a moment. ESPN Bet Live has everything you need to know before betting this week's football slate. Aaron, Joe, and Tyler have you covered with all the picks, props, and parlays. Plus, Liz Loza and I will stop by for our props that pop on Sunday. Check out ESPN Bet Live Sunday morning. Hey guys, back here on Fantasy Focus. All 4 of us here having a fun time so far. It's week
I'm not
10.
having fun at all.
Oh, what are you talking about,
He's
Mike?
pouting in his chair.
Outing.
You're crushing me right now in Dynasty. I feel like you have a bunch of good fantasy teams.
all right, I feel
you're
better
doing
now.
well. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
All right,
You're-
more nice stuff.
absolutely you're dominating us in red zone. Like at all the areas that it matters, Mike, you were doing very well.
All right, I feel better now.
I do want to ask you. I'm gonna start with you, Mike Clay, if that's all right.
All right.
You can use all the stats you want. I'm not gonna put you in a
Thank you.
box
I
like Field
appreciate
did.
that.
Yeah. Nobody puts baby in a corner.
When we're looking at guys to help propel you or push you into the fantasy playoffs, guys that you need at this point to be able to help
Chase.
you get there.
Yep.
I want to talk about someone that we haven't talked about a ton from a fantasy perspective, Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, of course, has to be a Jet. All right, just piling on my Jet.
No, that's not it.
All right.
No.
Not Alan Lazard.
That's true.
Now that Aaron Rodgers,
You've already made the playoffs if you have Allen Lazard.
that's true. That's true. You've already locked up that number 1 playoff
He's got so many touchdowns.
and drops, right, Mike? And drops.
Drops. Yeah, no point. No, you don't lose fantasy points for drops, so we don't really care about that.
It almost feels like you should. We almost should have you lose half a fantasy point.
Remember when Jamar Chase had drop problems in his first
That was his
preseason?
very.
How'd that guy work out?
I know.
Remember the lines on the ball from college? They were the lines.
I do remember
white
that.
lines
Saying that
weren't-
was
you couldn't see
different.
them?
Oh man.
Push it real good. That's the segment.
Anyway, I cut him in all my leagues when that happened. So.
Last-
Anyway, Aaron Rodgers. You wanna
Last
talk about
2
him?
weeks with Aaron Rodgers, he's been serviceable. Total of 5 passing touchdowns, no interceptions, but he doesn't really use his legs. Hasn't hit 300 yards yet this season. Now he does have Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams.
That helps.
Do you think that he can be a guy that you could potentially look at to help push you into the playoffs, or is he one of these guys that because he doesn't use his legs enough and the offense isn't where it's at, he's probably outside your top 10 to 12?
He's what we thought he was coming into the season. He's just going to be a boring QB2 with
He is
no
who you thought he
upside.
was?
He exactly is. He scored between 11.5 and 21.0 fantasy points in 8 consecutive games. So he is right in that window all the time. He pretty much always throws 2 touchdowns. Last week, he threw 3 touchdowns. That's the first time he's done that since week 10 of the 2022 season. So
2022?
Yes. So he missed most of last year, but and obviously that last year, they weren't particularly good. So for QB8 is his best finish of the season. That was last week, and that's just what he's going to be. He's once in a while going to slip into the top 10. The back end never going to be much higher than that. It is what it is. He just is that guy. He's that boring QB2 who, when the matchup's perfect, and by the way, this week the matchup is fine. Arizona hasn't been horrendous, but they haven't been good against quarterbacks. So I have him QB right around QB10. He's a deep league streamer, but not much upside.
Sounds like it sounds like he is who we thought he is.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Mike, we're not live, so you can practice that once.
No, I don't want to. I tried it the other day and it went poorly. I'm done. I'm out on that one.
Is this like
I can't do Denny Green. That's just not my.
He is who he.
No, they are who we thought they were.
Right,
Yeah,
because
that's
we thought he was.
Oh, okay. Well, you're talking semantics here.
No, it's
Stephania.
grammar.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't go to Princeton, so no big deal.
No.
Whoa! Shots fired.
Kid, I need to. I had to look it up because I remember Rodgers tried that scamper last week, and I was like, he got -1 rushing yards.
Oh my
at the
gosh.
end, so
Yeah, he doesn't. He's
so doing nothing with his legs.
Jalen Waddle
Generous,
of him.
by
Or
the way.
Cousins, Goff, like all these guys. They're like they're Philip Rivers is. Or Philip Rivers is.
Easy for you to say.
Speaking of
You about
grammar.
to say Philip Rizzers right there?
Philip Rivers is.
Riz God?
The plural of
Yeah.
Philip Rivers, whatever that is. They're all the same guy.
All right, Stephania, I'm going to ask you about Russell Wilson, if you do not mind. First week back, 24.9 fantasy points. That was helped along by a 6-point rushing touchdown, like whenever they can get in the end zone with their legs. But second week, only 13.8 fantasy points. Do you think that there will be enough passing volume in this Steelers offense for him to be someone that you could rely on as you get closer to the playoffs?
That's a good question. I don't know if there's ever going to be
very
enough
much,
passing
Stephania.
volume, but 3 touchdowns, no interceptions in his 2 starts. You're adding Mike Williams, so you've got another potential deeper threat, big guy who can make big catches. I think if they are going to let Russ cook a little bit in the Steelers offense, maybe you're going to get some more of those perimeter passes. I mean, we know Russ can throw the deep ball. That's one of the things. It's one of the reasons that he is starting. So I think between George Pickens, who I'll talk about a little bit later, and Mike Williams, I think you can see some upticking, if you will.
Yeah, they did add Mike Williams.
in the
They needed
Russ Williams yardage.
They needed a second pass catcher in
they
that
did.
offense. So
It did, yeah, but 264 or more passing yards in each of Russ's starts. That's pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah, he had
I
a
think he's on the. I mean,
57
it's a
attempts.
small sample size, right? It's only 2 games, but I do think there's potential there, and I like their matchup. Now 6 carries for 10 yards, so it's not like Russ is running anymore. He did get in the end zone.
Yeah, the first game he had 3 total touchdowns. Last week he had 1, but there were so many near misses, like those throws to George Pickens. He almost had more touchdowns in that game. Efficiency's been good, 9.5 yards per attempt. And by the way, Washington has allowed 5 18-plus point fantasy games to quarterbacks. They faced the fewest pass attempts this season. So, you can throw on them. I know they added Marshawn Lattimore. We'll see how much he plays in this game, but it's a fine enough matchup here for Russ. I think he's a fine streamer.
Part of this is not just specific to this week, but looking ahead, going forward as well. And worth noting, I mentioned this a couple times already on the show. The over-under in this game is 44.5 at ESPN Bet, or according to ESPN Bet, the highest total for any game for the Steelers this season. I also noted that who do they play in upcoming weeks? Twice against the Ravens. You might like Russ, both of those opportunities. Twice against the Bengals. You might like Russ in both of those opportunities. The Eagles, the Browns, the Chiefs. I think the 49ers as well. There are some good opportunities here for Russ to throw the football. I do not yet have the over-unders via ESPN Bet for the remainder of those games, but I'm going to guess they're going to hover closer to 44.5 than where they were for the first 6 or 7 games of the season, where it was like 7.5.
Yeah, we talked about this last week. The Steelers have an interesting schedule going forward. A lot of bad pass defenses there. They have the easiest schedule, or one of the easiest for receivers, but they actually have the hardest for running backs going forward. It's going to be a lot more passing for that team.
Hey, that would be nice if you need a guy like Russell Wilson. All right. Speaking of running backs, Mike, I want to ask about Javonte Williams.
My Mike, I'll take it.
Well, I'm just taking it off of Mike's comment, and then I'm going to transition it over to you. It's sort of like a double assist in hockey. Mike, in hockey, what happens is you can pass it to 2 guys, and then one of them will also
I do
get
know
it.
hockey.
Oh,
yeah.
you do know hockey?
I'm in one fantasy hockey league.
Oh, yeah, that's
You
right.
have Connor McDavid.
I do, and Austin Matthews.
Traded it all for them, yeah.
Javonte Williams has been so frustrating, I feel like. I mean, 2 weeks. inside the top 12. Every other week he's been running back 25 or lower. Yeah. But it does feel like this Broncos offense is getting a little bit better, like we talked about with Cortland Sutton and Bo Nix.
Yeah.
So how are you approaching the running backs here?
I feel like Javonte Williams is hanging on by a thread right now.
Sure is.
And just barely. So there are a couple of factors here. Let's talk about this week. Hanging on by a thread.
Hanging by a moment.
Hanging by a moment. Yeah, great song back in the day. He does have at least 15 opportunities in 5 of the last 6 games played. I consider an opportunity, a rush, or a target. That's good right there, right? Yep. But it's a terrible matchup this week. The Chiefs rank where, Mike, in terms of fewest fantasy points allowed?
They have allowed the fewest touches, yards, and fantasy points.
2 opposing running backs. That is bad right there.
That's
so
really
you don't love the matchup here for Javonte. And the drum beat. I don't know. Can you hear this?
Yeah, it's happening.
Can you hear this?
I think this is the week.
You hear that getting louder? That's Audric Estime's drum beat coming, baby.
That's right.
Sean Payton keeps saying it, and we talked about how before the game this past Sunday there was some reporting that Sean Payton had told Tracy Wolfson they expect more out of Audric Estime. We saw a little bit in the second half last week. Now that game was kind of all for naught because they were getting smoked, but he talked about it again Monday. Probably going to see some more Audric Estime. I don't know if like a league winner is quite how I would qualify Audric Estime, but you got a flexible bench spot right now. We're always looking for those diamond in the rough running backs.
Yep.
So as we think about this going forward,
there's a reason that Javonte Williams, as horrendous as the efficiency has been the last 2 years, has hung on the flex radar because Sean Payton feeds his running backs. Javonte gets a lot of volume, especially in the passing game. So if Estime, it does outplay the other guys, and is a 15-touch guy and gets few targets, he could definitely be a fantasy starter. But this is a brutal matchup. 13.2 fantasy points is the most fantasy points scored by a running back against the Chiefs this season. Every single running back unit that has faced them has failed to outscore their season average. Otherwise, they're the only team that could say that about any unit. In the quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends, there's only one that's been 100% successful keeping the other unit below their season average. It's the Chiefs against running backs. They dominate that position. Javonte is not. I have him. 4 teams on a bye, he's fringe top 25, but I would not want to start him this week.
Yeah, if you can find, ideally you don't have to use him in the running back spot. He can be a flex play for you, and if he's a flex play, you're likely looking at one of the other wide receivers.
Oh, do you get more points if they're in the running back slot?
No, you would not, but ideally you have another running back rather than being forced to play him in the running back.
I would say, I would try to bench him.
Yeah, if you can help it. Would you try to bench J.K. Dobbins, Mike? Because he has my early vote for Fantasy Comeback Player of the Year, for what it's worth. Running back 14 or higher in 3 of the last 4. Obviously, he fits into Jim Harbaugh's game plan with the way that they want to utilize this offense in Los Angeles. But he does get the Tennessee Titans. And I know he does have a tougher schedule, J.K. Dobbins, based on your strength of schedule the rest of the way. How do you feel about him here in Week 10?
Yeah, the Titans haven't been quite as dominant as they've been the past couple of years, but Dobbins is getting so much work. I know Gus Edwards was designated to return from IR. I don't know if he'll play this week. I don't even think it matters. Dobbins was taking control of that backfield beforehand anyway. So
clearly
Dobbins is just an easy lineup lock. You just keep rolling him out.
Do you offhand know approximately where the Titans rank in terms of pass defense efficiency?
No, but they're pretty good. They're
excellent in terms of just raw numbers. The reason why I asked about the efficiency is they're so bad that they don't play high-scoring games, so teams just don't really have to throw the football against them. But
7th best, something
it's kind of like reverse this year, right? For a long time, they were dominant run defense and a little bit looser in the secondary. This year, they're pretty stingy in the back end. Pretty stingy. And by the way, a lot of that without L'Jarius Sneed.
Yeah, he's missed quite a bit of time. You're right.
Andre Diggs hurt. Jamal Adams, that one didn't work out, but, they've been pretty good back there.
I think the thing for me at the start of the season was how much workload was J.K. Dobbins going to be able to handle, because now he's coming off the second, catastrophic lower extremity injury. So he's had the ACL, multi-ligament knee, really, and then the Achilles injury, and the answer is he's handled the workload fine. I was looking at, he had played 55 snaps last week, and the last few weeks, it's 44 snaps, 51, 42. He's not resting a lot. And he has performed well despite the volume of work. There doesn't seem to be a drop-off. So I think as long as he's healthy, it's not like they're worried about balancing the workload for him. I think he's their guy, and it's going to continue.
The fact that J.K. Dobbins had as many snaps last week as Jamar Chase had fantasy points this week continues to highlight just how unbelievable that game was.
It was so
Thursday Night
cool.
Football. I'm still thinking about it now. We're 3/4 of the way through the show, but it's just Jamar Chase. He might have scored another touchdown while we've been doing this show with how good he was on Thursday Night Football.
And by the way, we're probably all going to either be, either going to win our matchup or lose a matchup because of that. Chase this week. I got to be honest with you. I actually don't care if I lose a matchup when Jamar Chase goes off 55.
I mean, you can if you care about it. You're just
like,
giving yourself anxiety for no reason.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do at that point? You just
There's nothing you could do. I saw somebody saying you could go take a walk. There are all the things you could do on the weekend now that you have been beaten by
over.
Jamar Chase. But I have to say, if you saw Lamar Jackson after the game, it was just great. He was talking. He's like, that was like a video game. It was like playing in a video game with the back and the forth. Best Thursday night game I've seen.
Let me ask Mike a question. Are you more excited that you have Jamar Chase in your dynasty team against Daniel, or that I'm playing Tyler Fulgham this week in the Fantasy Football Now League?
that one.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like you hate losing more than you love winning. It's like, I don't, the win is fine, but watching Tyler lose is so much better. I mean, I can't even make it in the playoffs and win in that league. We need to take him down.
Oh, he would never let you hear the end of it.
I guess that's my point. It would be worse if he won that league than if,
You lost.
As long as he doesn't win,
You're good.
You're good.
yeah.
I started Mark Andrews as well last night, so things are
way to go.
shaping up nicely.
Although someone here on the
Tyler might be the one taking a hike over the weekend and not playing.
I face Lamar in that league, though. So
You're playing the
producers.
producers.
have
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson, so that hurts. Tough start to the week.
This doesn't have anything to do with this week, but is there another player other than J.K. Dobbins that you guys would have like as an early fantasy comeback player of the year? Like you had said, Stephania, coming off of 2 brutal ACL injuries.
Maybe Deontay Johnson exclusively as a Raven.
I mean, maybe we'll see how the second half goes.
I mean, it's hard. My heart is
kidding.
with Nick Chubb, even though it's not for fantasy performance, but it's like in real life comeback player of the year because nobody. I mean, you might not even walk normally again after the injury he had. But in terms of fantasy production, it's hard off the top of my head to outmatch J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah, J.K. would be one. I don't know. Like, do you qualify Justin Jefferson's injury last year as significant enough to be the comeback player? That he's been ridiculous.
He's been great.
No.
There's like Kirk Cousins. I'm trying to think of a
Kupp?
strong option.
Yeah. No. I mean, in terms of
Especially with where you drafted J.K. Dobbins.
that required a
a
certain right, exactly, value and all of that.
Well, maybe after the
Return
season
on
we should do
investment.
like an award show or something.
Oh, you know what? That's a really good idea. Mike finally brought something.
Has Mike
to the
not been
table.
invited in the past? He doesn't know we do that?
He doesn't own a tux. We don't let him on.
That's what it is.
That's right.
You own a tux, right?
I think we should
Tux? I don't know
have,
if I have a tux.
we should have the award show in some,
We will have some fun with
Island
our award
spot.
show this year, I believe.
It's like coming so quickly.
I know. I know.
You know who's not going to get an award? Us, if we don't move on.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm not sure DJ Moore's getting an award at our award show for what it's worth.
You know what this
Field.
reminds me of?
Tell me.
Reminds me of Brandon Ayuk early in the season. Just player, quarterback, wide receiver, off. Vibes bad, not great right now. So, I mean, DJ Moore is a really good player. It's an excellent. I mean, it's actually. Let me ask you, Mike. Do you think this would be Christian Gonzalez shadow?
Yes, I think I wrote that up as such. Yeah.
We've talked about varying results, but he's been darn good recently. Has Gonzalez?
He's been really good, yeah.
Largely done a great job of deterring opposing wide receivers. So that might be like number one detriment. But just because of how things have gone within this offense right now, hard to feel like DJ Moore is a must start. He ends up as wide receiver 23 after removing the wideouts from last night's game. So
You said he's wide receiver 23?
for me, yes, after removing the guys from last night.
Did you do that because he only has one finish inside the top 23 of wide receivers this year?
Paying homage to Michael Jordan. Yeah, it's tough. Man.
If you want
14's on a
some,
bye, obviously, as well.
I'd like some numbers, Mike. Do you have some numbers?
what that? Well, I mean, you just said it. Like I was going to point out that he only has like 2 decent games so far this season, but I wanted to say it's like they have an odd schedule going forward. You look at fantasy points allowed. Their rest of season schedule is really tough for quarterbacks, running backs, and tight ends, but it's easiest for receivers going forward.
Wow.
So that's really key because it's not just Moore; it's the other guys too that have not been very good in fantasy. Rome Odunze last week had 104 yards, but he was still third in line for targets, and the other two, including Keenan Allen. He only has 10 plus fantasy points twice. Keenan Allen's been over 7.6 points once this season. So just across the board, disappointment. And we thought that might be one of the best trios in the league. But the fact is, they had a couple good games there against really bad defenses, and they've really plummeted back to earth. Now, Caleb has to play better going forward for these guys to thrive in fantasy.
Been so frustrating. It's been so frustrating because it doesn't feel like you can start Keenan Allen. You can't start Rome Odunze, and yet he's had 2 huge boom weeks, but you didn't know which weeks you were supposed to start him.
These are just flex lottery tickets in 12-teamers right
Exactly.
now. I mean, Moore a little higher. He did have 9 targets last week. Again, the schedule lightens up. But this is a tough one against Gonzalez for sure.
Yep. All right, when we come back, we are going to dive into a big game watch talking about Tampa Bay and the San Francisco 49ers. We'll see you guys in just a moment. Get your lineup questions answered every single Sunday on Fantasy Football Now by using the hashtag FFNow. Join the FF Now crew 10 a.m. Eastern on ESPN2 and make sure you get ready for an incredible Sunday of NFL action. That's hashtag FF Now to get involved in the conversation. Back here on Fantasy Focus alongside Mike Clay, Stephania Bell, Field Yates. My name is Daniel Dopp. We're diving into Stephania's 49ers right now because we've got a couple of big updates here, Stephania. A couple of injury updates we need to know about. The biggest player in fantasy football has yet to take the field. What can we expect from your
Jennings has played a few games.
Oh, you're right. Juwan Jennings has played. You're right. That's my bad. What can you tell us about Christian McCaffrey?
You see the smile on my face?
It looks like you're happy.
The smile on my face is because Kyle Shanahan delivered some good news yesterday on KNBR. Shout out KNBR Radio in the Bay Area, for where I am from. I used to listen to them all the time when I was at home. And they got Kyle Shanahan coming on and saying that Christian McCaffrey has looked awesome in practice this week, and that they expect to see him out there. You know, Kyle doesn't want to give things away, but they got him chatting, and he's like, yeah, I mean, we expect him out there. He couldn't contain the joy for getting Christian McCaffrey back, because obviously it's a huge uptick for the entire offense. But also, remember, Deebo Samuel was banged up with the ribs and the oblique injury. He's expected to play. Juwan Jennings, you mentioned, because of the hip injury, he's been absent. He is expected to play. So this is feels like the 49ers, who have not really managed to have the full complement of their receivers and running backs on the team. Obviously, Brandon Ayuk's done for the year, so he's not going to be with us anymore on the football field. But this is the strongest they will have been since the start of the season, because they never did have McCaffrey. He was scratched in week 1.
Not worried about a ramp-up period, not worried about the number of touches. Like, even if he is limited,
I did not say
Christian
that.
McCaffrey. Okay.
I mean, I think that the 49ers aren't going to be foolish, right? After this, we have not seen Christian McCaffrey play football, and he can look as great as he does in practice. And I am sure it will be conversation throughout the game. I don't think he's going to be on a snap count. They haven't verbalized anything of that nature, but there probably is going to be a lot of conversation about how he's doing. They're going to see how hard he's working. How hard does he have to work in that game? I mean, they do have the luxury of having a Jordan Mason. So I think that they will do their best to utilize him where they feel like they need him the most. And they have a nice matchup against banged-up Tampa Bay.
How do you project this, Mike?
Yeah, so I did scale back his touches a little bit, but we talked about this earlier in the week. It's just, it doesn't matter if we rank him first overall or 20th overall. It's yes or no. You're starting, the answer is yes. You're starting Christian McCaffrey, even if he scaled back a little bit. I think the only question here is people might be wondering, can I still throw like Jordan Mason in my flex? And I think the answer there is probably not. I mean, it's a good matchup against Tampa Bay, but Mason last had double-digit fantasy points in week 4, and that was without Christian McCaffrey. You know, we're going into week 10 now, so I would not feel super comfortable starting him. Is it possible he has 15 carries and scores a touchdown? Yes. So if you're in a tough spot with 4 teams on a bye, fine, but I would prefer to avoid Mason. But, of course, I'm not avoiding ever Christian McCaffrey when he's active.
If he's out there, you got to start him this week, which is fantastic.
Can you imagine? Kittle, McCaffrey, Deebo.
And Pearsall, first-round pick.
And Pearsall.
And some guy who had like one of the best fantasy games of the season.
This double fingers crossed. I mean, I can't help it, right? I'm such a
49ers
ridiculous
need it,
fan.
too.
They do.
49ers really need it because they have
Absolutely
obviously
must get it.
Well, and the NFC West is
wide
competitive.
open.
You know, it's like I think in the preseason, everybody thought the 49ers had a chance to run away with it. They did not do that, and everybody has shown signs of life there. Everybody, the Cardinals at times look uber competitive. The Rams, who people thought might be done when Puka and Cooper Kupp got injured, they all of a sudden are competitive, and Seattle stays in the mix. So I think this is really anyone's division to take, and the 49ers need to come out strong.
Yeah.
I was just going to add, I think, are we getting to Juwan Jennings, or should I just?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that I think he's going to hang on that wide receiver 3 radar. He should be the number 2 receiver with no Brandon Ayuk. I'm curious to see how good and effective and productive and how utilized Ricky Pearsall is, because in theory, you take him in the first round to be that next guy ahead of Juwan Jennings. I know they extended him, but you spend a first-round pick on a receiver for a reason. So he could kind of neutralize Jennings, but I think short-term Jennings has some flex appeal.
And by the way, if ever there was a matchup for basically everybody to eat, it would be this one, right? I mean, we just saw the Chiefs have their best game of the season by far offensively against the Buccaneers. So a good opportunity for the San Francisco offense to feel great about itself coming out of the bye. Thank you, Christian McCaffrey. We can't wait to see you on the field.
On the other side, Mike, do you think that Baker Mayfield is a lineup lock with everything he's... I mean, last week felt like It wasn't his worst game of the season, but it felt like it.
Remember how succinct we were about the Jonathan Mingo? No.
Yes.
We should be equally succinct about the Baker Mayfield. Yes.
Yeah, and the main reason for that is he hasn't had Chris Godwin or Mike Evans for 2 games, and it hasn't mattered much. He's still been super productive, 2 or more touchdowns, 18-plus fantasy points in 8 of 9 games this season. His career high in passing touchdowns is 27. He's already at 23 this year. He has 189 rushing yards. His prior career high was 165. He's already cleared that number. And the Niners, 10th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. Only 2 have gotten to 14. You know, it is a tougher matchup, but it's not just complete domination like it's been in years past. So the way he's playing and adding value with his legs, yeah, I don't know how you bench Baker right now.
Here's my question, because who's going to be? Is it going to be the Kate Otten show? Because hear me out. Godwin's done for the year. Evans still out with a hamstring, probably not back until after the Week 11 bye. McMillan has a hamstring injury, didn't play in Week 9, still not practicing. Sterling Shepard played in Week 9, but has a hip and a hamstring injury, and on a short week, still not practicing. So, is it Trey Palmer? Is that
Jarrett?
Yeah. I mean,
matter.
and does it matter? And if so, are you starting any of them besides obviously Kate Otten, who's been?
This sounds like one of those NFL situations where they're going to have someone step up. But for us in fantasy, Kate Otten, in spite of how good Baker Mayfield is, Kate Otten is the only pass catcher that you are. Well, and Rashad White. We'll talk about the running backs in a minute. But like Kate Otten is the only one that it feels like I would have any confidence in.
This is a fun, I might inspire a red zone question here today. Who scores more fantasy points in this game on Sunday, George Kittle or Kate Otten?
Oh, that's fair. I mean, I would pick Kittle, but it's a toss-up.
Interesting. I would pick Kate Otten.
We'll have to find out.
I mean, did you rank Otten ahead of Kittle?
No, but it's because you have Kate Otten going against me in Dynasty, so maybe I can like reverse engineer him not doing well. Like I either win the board bet and I
this
lose
strategy
the game.
goes great for
Always
Field
good to
in
have.
red zone, so you should- it's been going
You're
great.
so mean, Mike. Mean Mike Clay. My gosh.
Big bully.
Let's talk about this backfield, though, because we did mention, like with Stephania laying it out, the pass catchers do seem pretty thin. Obviously, it looks like both Bucky Irving and Rashad White, they both get a number of touches in this backfield. They're kind of been split in time, and I'm not sure outside of the passing game usage.
Yeah, but that's all they need to maintain a floor, right? The ceiling is definitely a question mark for both of these players. Right. Rashad White has finished inside the top 15 once this entire season, but if you like top 35 finishes, he's got 7 of those. So, you know, the range of outcomes is actually fairly narrow here, but he has 3 catches or more in every game except for 1 this season, does Rashad White. He carries the edge in my rankings over Bucky Irving. Rashad White is now RB24 after removing the players from last night's game. Bucky Irving a handful of slots behind as he has 3 or more catches in 3 straight games, but he hasn't played more than 42% of the snaps in 3 straight games. Still Rashad White 1, Bucky Irving 2. Certainly, if Irving finds the end zone and White doesn't, it'll be reverse. But as far as the process is concerned, both close to usable as flex options, but White still higher in the pecking order. You disagree, Mike?
Yeah, I have Irving just ahead. It is tough to, I mean, last week, Rashad White had 6 touches. He did score a touchdown. His carry share has dipped in 3 consecutive games. It's just more Bucky Irving with a little Sean Tucker mixed in. But Irving's tough, too, because he's been over 10 carries in 1 of 9 games, over 3 targets in 1 of 9 games. You just mentioned the snap, so it's tricky. I will say this, though. The 49ers can be had in the passing game as far as running backs go, so that does benefit the Bucs backfield. That's how they're used often.
I will give just a few more numbers to be able to close this out. Last 3 weeks, it just feels like everything's been so close. You said running back 1 and running back 2. It feels more like running back 1 and running back 1A and 1B.
That's a good way of putting it.
Irving has a slight edge in touches, 38 to 33 over the last 3 weeks. White has a slight edge in yards by just 20 yards the last 3 weeks, 213 to 195. Similar passing game usage, 14 catches to 13 catches in favor of Rashad White. The area where Rashad White has really been able to do more things than Bucky Irving is he's just scored more touchdowns. He's found the end zone 4 times. Bucky Irving only has 1. But they're both being utilized in this offense, so it does feel like it's a 1A, 1B kind of conversation.
Spider-Man meme.
Both of them are flexes, in my opinion.
It's good. I mean, the offense is playing well. They're both playing well right now. Rashad White's at 5.4 yards per carry in his last, 5 games. So he's running the ball well. They're involved in the passing game. They're both flex options.
We don't normally do this. Who do you guys got in this game? Daniel, you first. Be nice.
It's in Tampa.
I got the San
in
Francisco
Tampa.
49ers.
Tampa, Mike, what do you got?
It's in Tampa.
Don't you dare.
I think the Niners get it.
There was some vitriol there when you said that. I felt it.
Oh, come on.
I do. I picked the Niners.
Yeah, they're banged up. Tampa Bay and
Yeah.
the 49ers, the momentum, the adrenaline
Coming
of
off a
everybody
bye.
coming back and coming off a bye.
You're gonna
Shanahan's fired up.
You're taking the Bucs.
I'm
first,
taking
right?
the Niners.
No, you can't do that.
Yes, I can, because last night I tried to be that guy that would steal one, and I almost did steal one, and I had a great video queued up.
Too bad.
And then Lamar Jackson stole it away from me.
That's going to happen. That's going to happen.
Are you taking
The
Daniel?
refs took it away from
The
me.
49ers.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, that was bad.
Clean
Yeah.
sweep.
When we come back, we got our starts of the week here on Fantasy Focus. We'll see you guys in just a moment. With Profit Boost, same-game parlays, and exclusive offers from your favorite ESPN personalities, ESPN Bet has sports fans covered. New players can get their first bet insured up to $1,000 in bonus bets by signing up with promo code FANTASY. Download the ESPN Bet app today. Back here on Fantasy Focus alongside Mike Clay, Stephania Bell, and Field Yates. My name is Daniel Dopp. We're diving into our starts of the week. Guys, do you mind if I kick this one off?
Sure, go for it.
Oh, it's
Yes,
your prerogative.
I'm going to go with my doppelganger, TJ Hawkinson, if you do not mind. Obviously, he's only played one game so far this year. Last week, he looked fantastic as far as I looked at it. Only played 45% of the snaps. He looked out there. I thought he looked fine. He looked like TJ Hawkinson. They were working him back into it. But I do want to say I love this matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Last 4 tight ends to play Jacksonville. Cole Kmet, 24 fantasy points. Hunter Henry, 17.2 fantasy points. Tucker Kraft, 16.8 fantasy points. Grant Calcaterra, 8 fantasy points. But, I mean, everyone knows
Pretty
Mike.
good for him.
Honestly, for Grant Calcaterra, 8 fantasy points is not bad. They have been allowing a ton of fantasy points over the last month to the tight end position, and I think this is one of those areas. We love Sam Darnold going up against this defense because of how they can be beat through the air. I think TJ Hawkinson is going to be on the receiving end of at least a handful of passes, maybe even getting in the end zone. So he is my start of the week here in Week 10.
I like it.
What do you think about Darnold, though? Are you convinced he should be started this week, Mike?
He is my lineup lock this week.
Oh, what?
Start of the week. Our start of the week. Yeah, I'm going with Sam Darnold. He's going to be throwing in passes. Look, one weekly finished better than 9th this season, so you might be hesitating about him, but there's a lot to like. Season high, 290 passing yards last week, 2 or more passing touchdowns in 6 of 8 games, so you're getting a high floor. 15 rushing yards a game, that's worth about a half of a passing touchdown, so you're getting a little bit there. But the key, of course, to your point, is the matchup here against Jacksonville. Most touchdowns, 19, and fantasy points to quarterbacks. The highest EPA allowed to opposing passing games. The second most passing yards, only 2 interceptions. So they're not forcing turnovers. Top 3 in YPA and completion percentage. Also, on top of all that passing, the 3rd most rushing yards allowed to quarterbacks so far this season. 18-plus fantasy points allowed in 7 different games to quarterbacks. Just across the board, horrendous against quarterbacks. Sam Darnold is a good streamer this week.
Love it. Love to see
You think they're proud of those numbers, the Jaguars?
He really is.
No, they're not. They're not proud about them at all. I mean, that defense on paper is way better than they've showed. It's just unacceptable.
Interestingly enough, Stephania, neither of these two guys adhere to ladies first, so I will defer.
Oh, well,
gosh,
well,
wow,
thank you,
Field.
Field,
Why
for
wait
that.
till now? To just
I know,
throw us
right?
My start of the week is George Pickens, wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who in the last couple of weeks has really been thriving with Russell Wilson. He was the top wide receiver for the Steelers in Week 8, which was the last game they played, so they were on bye. 4 catches for 74 yards on 5 targets. He did have a touchdown catch that was overturned by replay, so it might have even been more. In Russell Wilson's 2 starts, 9 catches for 185 yards and a score. He can make the difficult catches. He is a down-the-field threat. Russell Wilson is in there because he can throw the ball down the field. They have a favorable matchup against Washington. I know Washington just acquired Marshawn Lattimore, but he's still dealing with a hamstring injury, not practicing. I don't think he plays in this game. Go get him, George Pickens.
That's a great pick.
Oh, stop.
Pickens.
I see what you did there, Field, and I will give you credit for it.
Thank you.
But I didn't really like
You
it.
know, when the Pickens are slim.
Okay, that was a lot better.
That was
a lot better.
That was good right there.
Where are you going?
I'm going with Tyrone Tracy Jr., so thank you to Mike and
it's a good
you
thing we
for
didn't
not
use all the
using all the
numbers.
good stats earlier. I think Mike said good start football player.
That's it.
Yes.
That's all you need.
That's actually kind of close to it. So as we know, it has become his backfield in New York. He has played at least 60% of the snaps in 5 straight games. I don't suspect that will change, especially over the past 2 games. He has handled most of the carries. 36 carries over the last 2 games for Tyrone Tracy. He actually hasn't been that involved in the past couple of games in the passing game. They haven't really needed him in that regard. He's been, I guess they probably could have used him more, but I don't forecast they will need him very much in that regard this Sunday because they play the Carolina Panthers, who've allowed 159.4 rushing yards per game. That ranks dead last in the NFL. Tyrone Tracy Jr. is a chunk run waiting to happen. Give me Tyrone Tracy Jr. as my start of the week. I don't know how to say that in Germany, so I will just say Guten Tag.
There you go.
in German.
I don't know any German at all.
Guten Tag.
I guess that would be it.
I think
Wiener
it's a
Schnitzel?
greeting. Yeah, that's a food.
Is that a
No,
thing?
there's a.
Stephania, you've got to know some German, right? You went to Princeton
I think
and
it's
Yale.
eins, wein, drei, Zufen. I think it's 1, 2, 3, drink. That's
Oh,
fine.
nice.
Something like that. I might have gotten it wrong. Apologies if I.
If we have any German listeners, like people based in Germany, please send
Yes,
us
please.
tweet.
Oh, send us some photos from the game, too, at Fantasy Focus if you can on Twitter. We love you guys. Today's show is presented by Boost Mobile. Don't forget to love each other. Please be kind to yourself. You deserve it. And good luck here in Week 10. We'll see you guys in Fantasy Football now. See ya. Is that? Dankeschön.